Welcome to Behind the Recipe. I'm your host, Christina Hitchcock. Join me every week as we dive into the joys of cooking, explore kitchen tips and tricks, and share delicious recipes that will inspire your next meal. So, whether you're a seasoned cook or just learning your way around the stove, there's something here for everyone. So, today we are talking with Anja Eckert from Our Gabled Home about sourdough. And I'm very excited about this topic, and I will be the first one to admit I know nothing about it. So you are going to get peppered with questions from the newbie here. So welcome to the show, Anja.
Please, yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. And the good news is I can talk about sourdough all day long.
Well,
So you
good.
don't
I
have to
probably
stop
have
me.
lots of questions.
I probably dream about sourdough now that I've made it my business kind of
Right.
coincidentally. But
Eat,
yeah,
breathe, and
no,
sleep
I
it.
mean, I love sourdough and I find it really fascinating. And first of all, yeah, Anja Eckert. I have this blog, ourgabled.home.com, and also on YouTube. All my handles across all socials are the same, Our Gabled Home. And I kind of stumbled into the sourdough content a little bit by accident. I had a bit of a homesteading, homemaking niche. And one day, literally, I had no idea what I was going to make my video about, but I wanted to make a video because I publish one video a week on YouTube and I
Mhm.
have to talk about something. I thought, you know what? Well, I'll just talk about my family's generations old sourdough method. And it was super off the cuff. It was not scripted and it's still my number one video on YouTube.
Wow.
It's like it makes me cringe watching it because it's so bad on so many levels. So when I tell people don't go watch it, it makes them actually go watch it because so
Isn't
it's
that
always
the
great
worst?
marketing to tell people don't watch it. But you know, it
Yeah.
works because it's like it's very cringeworthy. 4 years later for me to watch it. Anyhow, excuse me. Most people start a sourdough, make a starter by mixing flour and water and capturing the wild yeasts in the environment. And there are some in the flour and maybe on your hands. We have a microbiome on our skin
Mhm.
and we're trying to cultivate those. And most people do that by doing everyday feedings and discards because if you just feed and don't discard, you end up with huge amounts of sourdough starter and nobody needs that. And ideally, you keep a bit of a schedule, you kind of watch it, you make sure it sits in the right environment. And then after, I don't know, 5 days, maybe 10 days, it's all different because it's a
Hmm.
living, breathing thing. You should have a sourdough starter. It's a young one, but you can do something with it. And then you continue this process, the feeding and the discarding to maintain it. Now, my method is completely different. And if you are the camp where you're like, oh my gosh, I read all the instructions and, I have to do all these things. I'm already overwhelmed just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Or you have tried it and you found it too complicated. Or you've actually made a starter and then realized, you know what, I really don't need another pet sitting on my counter that I have to feed all the time and do something. And then when I travel, I have to take it to a sourdough hotel. And I'm not kidding, those things
Oh,
exist.
are you serious?
I'm 100% serious. You
Oh,
can, I mean, I haven't done it, but I know sourdough hotels exist. I'm from, the greater San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm pretty certain there is one in San
oh my
Francisco
goodness.
because yeah, San Francisco is sourdough capital, right?
I guess you
There's
can monetize anything.
well, yeah, I think it's also just a service, because people, it's like with their dog, they go on vacation and then they need a dog sitter, so they need a sourdough sitter.
Makes sense.
Anyhow, I was born and raised in Germany. And I love this story when my dad died when I was really young. But the story goes that when he married my mom, he told her, now you're going to go to your new mother-in-law and learn how to make sourdough and bake with sourdough. My mom, compliant as she was back then, that has changed since then. She went to my grandmother and learned how to make sourdough. So when I grew up with sourdough, I never officially had a start date when I started learning about sourdough or baking with sourdough. I just organically grew up with it. I was
Mhm.
watching over her shoulder. I grew up on her sourdough bread. That's the only thing we did with sourdough. We only made a very hearty German, dense whole grain sourdough bread. And I remember when we were visiting my grandparents, my mom and my grandmother would sit there and ooh and ah, oh, your bread is so different from mine, but we're using the same method and the same recipe and blah, 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 blah. So I actually thought that our method, which I'll explain in a moment, was just how everybody did it. But sourdough wasn't a huge thing. It certainly wasn't as trendy as it is now, even in Germany. And I think in like fifth grade, I would trade my dense sourdough bread with other kids in the school who had like white, fluffy bread.
We always want you
But
to
I'm, but yeah, exactly. Grass is greener on the other side. However, probably starting in my early 20s or so, when I was living on my own and I had a grain mill and I was baking sourdough bread.
Hmm.
So the starter we make, we jumpstart the whole process. Basically, we take cultured buttermilk. And just before anybody's wondering, I don't think you can use powdered buttermilk because your buttermilk needs to have life active cultures.
Okay.
And if you go to a store, most stores, at least in my area, I mean, I can find buttermilk really easily. It needs to have life active cultures, and most of it will.
Okay.
You cannot use the buttermilk that you get from curdling milk with vinegar or lemon juice because
Mm,
that curdles it, but it's not a cultured product.
gotcha.
And for people who live in countries where you really can't get buttermilk, I often say, you can also use yogurt, kefir, however people pronounce it. If you're dairy free, you could use plain kombucha. I think people have had success with
Mm,
cashew yogurt, like non-dairy yogurts and so
right,
forth.
right.
And essentially, so back to the buttermilk, that's how I do it. Buttermilk and flour, I mix it into a thick pancake batter like consistency. And I look at it and I put a loose lid on it. Mostly, I want to keep dust from flying in there and critters and so forth. So it doesn't need to be airtight. I actually do want a little bit of airflow. And I set it in a warm spot. Sourdough likes warm, somewhere between, what is it, like 72, I'm a metric gal, 72 to maybe 82, 80,
Okay.
86 maybe on a good day. So I have put it in a windowsill where it's warm. There are contraptions, and you can also put it on if you have a stove with
Mm,
like a gas stove. You can set it
yeah.
there. People have put it inside their stove with the stove light on. Just note to self, if you have other people in your household that just turn on the oven to preheat it and kill your sourdough starter, it's happened before. So put a little note on there, remove sourdough starter before turning on oven or something like that. So in the summer, you might have a sourdough starter after 5 days. You stir every day. If you forget it, don't fret it. Just stir the next day. So there's no, you need to stir every 6 hours.
Okay.
It's just really intuitive kind of, rule of thumb-ish type of thing. And so after 5 days, maybe in the winter, 10 days, I've successfully made sourdough starters in the winter. You should have a young starter. And that one is probably not active enough to actually rise a bread. Now,
Okay.
with white flour, that's a little easier, excuse me, than whole grain flour. I love whole grain. You can also do a ratio of 50-50, 40-60, whatever, you like. Um, I always tell people, you know what? Just add a pinch of commercial yeast. But then the sourdough purists are like, well, but then it's not true sourdough. And I'm thinking, okay, so what's really most important here?
Right.
And you
Right.
can ask yourself that question. Okay, so do you want to be a purist? And I feel like there's tons of time in your life where you can just be the purist and just, an upgrade from my method
Mm,
and, do all the other things, which I can talk about in a bit, like hydration levels and, and manipulating the dough and retardation and all of that. You can always do that, but I feel like I've lowered the bar to entry to sourdough for a lot of people.
yeah.
Oh, it's too young. So I
Yeah.
add a
Too young.
pinch of commercial yeast because yeasts are in a sourdough culture. A sourdough culture has many different strains of wild yeasts and beneficial bacteria.
Hmm.
And about 150, maybe 180 years ago or so, don't pin me on the date, people have found, or scientists have found, that there's a few really reliable yeast strains, and they have isolated them. And I think now they can grow them synthetically in a
Oh,
lab.
wow.
And that's the commercial yeast. But yeast cultures are part of your sourdough culture.
Okay.
And that's why I'm not shy to just add a little bit pinch of yeast, because what it does is it makes you feel successful with your first loaf of bread instead of having some dense brick in there that you don't know what to do with. But you can always turn it into either breadcrumbs or
Okay.
croutons. You can always do something with it or put
Right.
it in compost. I mean, and so then you continue with your sourdough starter. Now, what I have taught in the past years was to add, so keep a little bit of sourdough starter back, maybe a quarter cup, maybe even a little bit less, and add a ton of white flour to it. Mix it into a really dense consistency so
Okay.
that you can almost not manipulate it anymore. Throw some extra flour on top, put a tight lid on, and stick that in the refrigerator. And then it can sit there easily for 6 weeks and you don't need to do anything
Oh,
with it.
wow. So it kind of puts it in like
Perfect
a stall mode.
into a dormant mode. And if you will, I'm separating out the feeding because the feeding will be flour and water. Because what I'll do is, or this is how my family's always done it, the night before I want to do something with my sourdough starter, I pull it out of the refrigerator. I add room temperature water to it, mix it back into, and yes, it can be lumpy. Don't worry about it. Mix it back into that thick pancake batter like consistency. Leave it out on the counter, loosely covered, and the next morning I have an active sourdough starter.
Mm.
That's essentially my method in a nutshell. And what I have learned, because it's so fun on my YouTube channel, I feel like I'm teaching, but I'm also learning so much from my viewers because
Yeah.
they've told me, oh, my grandmother in Hungary, she always used to roll up her little bit of sourdough starter into a ball and keep it in her bag of flour. Because when
Huh.
you think about it, 180 years ago, people did not have digital scales. They did not measure out
Right.
50 grams of flour and water. They certainly did not, they were not in a position to waste anything.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have refrigeration. So, how did they do it? Now,
Right.
I will say that with my method, you can bake a general bread. And if you're not sure, I mean, I've baked tons of breads without any, I mean, I want to say hundreds of breads without any commercial yeast. So it works. But you can manipulate your sourdough starter by more frequent feedings and keeping it in a consistently warm spot. And then you can also affect the sourness of and you can be a little bit more scientific about it. You can
Mm.
always level up from there. But I really love when people say, oh my gosh, I have tried sourdough for so long and I got so frustrated I gave up, and with your method I've been baking and my family loves the bread and blah blah blah.
Oh, good.
Really, that warms my heart.
Yeah.
That totally warms my heart.
Well, I'm gonna have to
So,
give this a try because it does sound like
yes,
so
please.
it sounds like one feeding.
Yes.
You do that refrigerated where you refrigerate that
Mhm.
section, then you just feed it the one time before you that's not that's not a lot of work. I can handle that.
No, no. And and
I
then
can
I
remember
also
to do
say
it once.
yeah, and I also say to people, don't ever give up. There might be, I mean, I mean, maybe not a million. It sounds great, but there's a ton of reasons why you might not be successful your first try.
Hmm.
And there could be something wrong with your flour. Don't use tap water because of tap water often has not chlorine, but something like that, like some chlorine type of product in it.
Right,
And when you think about it, the chlorine is supposed to kill any unwanted things in your tap water, but it's also going to kill, it's like antibiotics, right?
right.
It's supposed to kill the bad bacteria, but it's also killing the good bacteria.
Mhm.
So use distilled water. I just learned somebody told me that the type of chlorine they use for water does not evaporate. So just leaving your tap water out for 24 hours does not remove it. Or
Gotcha.
use filtered if you have a filter that will filter it out.
Yeah. I have
Sometimes,
well water, so I'm not even on like a city water. We have our own
okay.
well. But I would probably do what you said and use distilled just to kind of control
Yeah.
the environment a little
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Eliminate the
Yeah,
rooms for mistake.
right.
I will also say that some people who are very, um, live in a very sanitized environment, like,
Mhm.
they're cleaning their kitchen with a lot of bleach and Clorox and so forth, oftentimes have a harder because, again, you're killing the good and the bad
Right.
because those good bacteria live in your environment. They're all around us.
Okay.
And yeah, but I do have a video and I do have a blog post that says basically, if you have mold on your sourdough starter, what could have gone wrong?
Mm.
And even though if your starter never develops bubbles and never gets that pleasantly sour smell and never really becomes an active starter. I will refer people often to this, the reasons for mold and how to prevent them article or video, because the measures are pretty much the same.
Okay.
Because essentially mold is something that your beneficial bacteria can outcompete. And if you don't have enough of those, you might not get mold. You just don't have a starter, but you get the drift. So it
Right.
gets really fast. I mean, I love this whole
No,
topic.
this is very sciencey. This is awesome. I love it. You're
Yeah,
something
well,
I
I'm
can't
no
do.
science. I'm no scientist, but I can totally geek out about this whole thing.
I love it. So this sounds a lot like, I don't know if you remember back in like the 90s and early 2000s, that Amish friendship bread. Do you remember?
Yes, yes. In Germany, I actually had that too, and you had to keep that thing going because
Right.
otherwise it would die, and
And
then
give
you
it to
would,
like all these people, and everybody was so
right.
sick of getting it. And they're like, stop giving it to me. And then
And you know what we called it in Germany?
what?
We called it Hermann, which is Herman. And we called it Hermann.
That's too funny. I lived in this little town where I didn't know anybody. I had just gotten married. I knew nobody, and I don't know how I ended up with one of these. My mom probably gave me one.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? I don't know anybody to give it to. Like, I live in a little town, like all by myself. I know nobody. And I had all these like little Ziploc bags of things that I had to
hmm
feed. And
hmm Yeah.
it was a lot of work.
Yeah, no, it is. And that's why I feel like for these people who, well, I shouldn't say these people, but for people who end up with a ton of discard and
Yeah.
just keep on throwing it out because you just cannot keep up with baking. If you are somebody who makes sourdough pancakes in the morning and, and makes maybe sourdough English muffins in the evening and then, constantly uses their sourdough starter, I would say, sure, then that method is actually much better for you than
Right.
putting in the refrigerator and keeping it somewhat dormant if you're using
Yeah.
it every day. But for most people that I'm aware of, that's a little bit too much of a commitment.
Okay. So we have this dormant dough and we
Mhm.
decide we're going, our starter, I should say, and we decide we're going to start to bake some things. We take it out, we feed it a little bit, we wake it up, it starts doing
Mhm.
its thing. We can bake with it. So we're going to have some left. And is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Like
you
the
need some left.
discard?
Yes, you need some left for the next one. And
Okay.
what I have since done is that I have a bit of a hybrid method depending on if I know I'm going to be on vacation. Let's say I'm going to Germany for 2 weeks and I know I
Mhm.
won't be baking. I'll put a lot of flour on it. If I know that it's Monday and I won't be baking until Thursday or Friday, I just take my little bit of sourdough starter. I just leave a little bit in the jar and I do not use the same jar. I mean, yes, I'm not using a fresh jar, is what I
Oh,
meant to say. I'm using the same jar and it gets really grody.
yeah.
And just leave a little bit in there and put it in the refrigerator as is. I
Okay.
don't do anything to it. It's okay for a few days, maybe a week or so.
Hmm.
And what might happen is you get a little bit of separation on top, like a little bit of liquid. It's
Hmm.
called, we call it hooch. And there's two camps. One camp says, oh, just stir it back in. And the other camp says, oh, no, throw it out and give it a good feeding. It's a bit of a sign that your sourdough starter is hungry, that it needs to be
Oh,
fed. Yeah.
okay.
It doesn't matter. It hasn't gone bad. Also sourdough, once it's a little bit more mature, it's also really robust. And I've only had mold in the 40 or some years that I've been dealing with sourdough. I've only had mold once.
Wow.
I'm thinking, what did I do wrong? I can tell you what happened. And so I'm still learning. I had a piece of moldy citrus, and I didn't see that because the mold was on the bottom of the, I don't know, orange, lemon, or
Right.
something. And mold spores travel.
Mm. Okay. That
So
makes sense. So clean your fridge first.
clean your fridge, make sure you have no moldy fruit, especially when you're just making a sourdough starter. Once you have an established one, they'll be a bit more robust and less susceptible to mold because the good bacteria can outcompete the mold spores. You also kind of want to keep it a little bit separated from your other ferments. Let's say you're doing sauerkraut. I would keep that a little bit away because you're trying to cultivate slightly different cultures than
Okay.
your sourdough starter. So there's all these little things, but I'm trying to make it sound as little as uncomplicated as it is.
Okay.
It is, yeah. And then when people have questions, they can reach out to me and I'm happy to either steer them towards the right resource or help them out. And yeah, so pepper me with questions.
Okay, so you definitely did uncomplicate it for me, and you explained some of the vocabulary I think I wasn't familiar with. So that was very good.
Okay.
Um, I feel like because in my mind it was always like I had flashbacks to this friendship bread that I would have to be
Mhm.
like it like grew in mass, and I was constantly having to figure out what to do with this stuff. But it doesn't sound like we're working at that kind of scale, which is
No.
nice. And I think feeding it once is something I can handle. I mean,
Hmm.
that's doable.
Hmm.
I like that method. So with this discard, so that's the part that, we get. So we're okay, let me back it up. So we have this, we took it out of the refrigerator, we fed it, we warmed it up, we brought it back to life, we're ready to bake.
We added some water
Some
because
water.
we added the flour when we put in the refrigerator
Yeah.
and we're just adding the water and
Okay.
we're sort of reconstituting it, right?
Right. And so then we follow the recipe and use however much of this starter, whatever
Right.
our recipe calls for. And then we have some left over. So we keep a
Right.
small amount for
Correct.
the starter again. And
Correct.
then
Yeah.
anything left is what's the discard. It is called the discard, correct?
Yeah.
Or no?
So
Or
yes,
did I?
let's do the math here. Let's say, and because I'm a metric girl, you have 500 grams of starter, right?
Mhm.
I'm just making this up. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's probably a lot of starter.
I won't
500.
hold you to this.
Okay. So you need 200 for your bread, which is
Okay.
not an unreasonable amount. 200 grams of starter for your bread.
Okay.
You want to keep maybe 30, and then you would have whatever. I
Okay.
can't do that, but then you have some left, right? So yes, you would technically have some discard. I have probably become experienced enough at this point to be able to gauge how much I need for my recipe.
Mm.
As for I have a bread that I just kind of throw the grains into my mill and I have an idea how much. And, sometimes I use a little bit more starter and sometimes I use a bit less, but
Hmm.
I'm also comfortable enough with it that I don't need it to be super reliable because here's the thing. The less starter you have for your bread, the longer you may need to let it rise. So I have that
Okay.
flexibility to say, hey, I had a little bit less starter. My bread hasn't quite risen. So I'm not going to bake it quite yet. I'm going to wait until instead of baking it at 6 p.m., I'm going to bake it at 8 p.m., right?
Okay.
If you are new or a little bit unsure, I would say stick to a recipe that gives you the exact amounts. However, there's still some because the recipe can only give you the amount of starter and water and flour or whatever else you put in there, but it doesn't know how warm it is in your kitchen. It
Mm.
doesn't know the humidity level of your environment and also the other microbial beneficial content of your environment. And those all influence how quickly your sourdough starter or your dough rises. So
Okay.
a little bit of work the dough, not the recipe.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes sense because there's a lot of things going on here.
right,
So the sourdough bread, the main difference is the fermented flavor, which I absolutely love.
right.
Um, but the process for baking the bread and everything is pretty much the same as making like traditional bread, not sourdough bread. Like you still
It
let it rise
can be.
and
It can be, yes.
okay.
And I often recommend for people starting out with sourdough bread is to use a loaf pan
Mhm.
instead of free forming that kind of nice round
Right.
artisan boule, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I use a loaf pan because then it doesn't really matter how runny your dough is.
Oh, it's contained.
With a round one, you need to shape it and you need to make sure that it doesn't turn into a pancake, but actually rises in the middle and gets a nice dome shape. So that can be, I would say, if you're a confident baker and if you're not worried about what am I going to call it? A learning experience. I don't want to call it mistakes
We're gonna
or
walk, we're not gonna
failure.
run.
There's no failure. There's only learning experience.
Yeah,
So
true.
if you're adventurous and not worried about learning experiences, I'd say go for it because,
Okay.
it can be done and it's not brain surgery. But if you're like, I would just want to keep it simple. I just want to get my, stick my toes in the water and I want to have, then I would say use a loaf pan because
Okay.
then the dough can't go anywhere. It's constrained.
Fully
Yeah.
contained.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, I would definitely want as many rules around me as possible. Yeah,
Guardrails.
guardrails, not rules, guardrails. Yeah,
No,
that's a
that's all
great.
good. Yeah. Yeah, and so start with a simple recipe. I mean, I have some recipes. There's tons of sourdough recipes out there. Start with a simple recipe, like a basic one,
Mhm.
and just get that successful feeling and the motivation to keep going. And
Yeah.
then there are, there is, I have a blog post, excuse me, in which I think I have compiled 17 different ways you can influence the sourness of your bread.
Oh, okay.
There are 17 different ways. Some
Wow.
people don't like the super sour, they like it kind of mild. And then
Mhm.
some people like the extra sour San Francisco sourdough bread.
Right.
And but there are ways that you can influence it and influence the sourness of your bread. It's
Okay,
very
so we can grab that from your website then.
yes.
That is
Yeah.
awesome. Well,
And there's also a video to it on YouTube. Yes.
oh, perfect. Even
Yes.
better.
Yes.
We'll definitely include links to that in the show notes so you can grab that if you're interested
Yeah.
in the sourdough process.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
we'll be here until tomorrow if I go through all the 17.
yeah, yeah, grab those and grab that printable and learn from there. But I mean, that's fascinating that you can affect the flavor like that
Mhm.
within 17 different ways.
Right. Right. I wouldn't necessarily recommend looking into that when you just get started. I would just say, just make your sourdough starter. And then, if you don't get, I get people reaching out to me, oh, it's day 10 and I've done this and I've done that and I still don't have any bubbles and what am I doing? I have a few recommendations that I typically give and I often say, maybe try a different batch of flour.
Okay.
Sometimes your batch of flour might be contaminated or just no good or whatever. Just try a different batch, change
Okay.
up the variables a little bit. I do have one little tip that
Mhm.
my family uses, and we use caraway seeds.
Okay.
Now, before somebody says, "Ooh, I don't like caraway seeds," hear me out. Um, my mom always added caraway seeds. She used white flour. I remember this one time. So we were still living in Germany. We were visiting the United States in, oh, I don't know, like 1990s or something. And in the supermarkets, all the bread we found was some variation of Wonder Bread. And we're like, oh, we cannot possibly eat this.
Right.
So my mom made, we were in Colorado Springs visiting friends. She made a sourdough starter in the kitchen. She went to the store and it probably wasn't any fancy organic flour. It was just probably regular all-purpose flour. She
Mhm.
found some buttermilk. She mixed a sourdough starter. And I think 6 days later, we made some sourdough bread, white
Oh,
sourdough bread. And it was fine. I don't remember it being anything weird. But she added caraway seeds to it. And so the idea behind the caraway seeds is that they're essential oils promote the growth of certain bacteria that we want.
okay.
And now you can do a few things. If you really, really don't like caraway seeds, trust me on this one. By the time 5 days later, 6 days, 7 days later, the caraway seeds have soaked up so much water that they lose their pungency. And unless you really bite on one, you cannot taste them. And how many do you add? Oh, maybe a quarter teaspoon or something. It's just
Right.
like I shake a few into my palm and then put them in there and
Right.
kind of like, that's good enough. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. You can also do this after the fact. If you start a starter and you're using flour and buttermilk, and after day 3 or 4, nothing is going on, it's dead as a bug. You can always still add some caraway seeds. You can also grind the caraway seeds into
Okay.
more of a powder. It will still have the essential oils in there, but then you won't be biting. But they soak up so much water, they lose their pungency because I'm
Mm.
not a big fan of biting on caraway seeds either.
Yeah.
But then when you think about it, when you use that sourdough starter to make a bread, there's very little left in the bread. So it's just really they're far in between.
Okay. That makes
So
sense.
that's
So,
yeah.
yeah, my
So
family,
that's one
I
tip.
have family from Norway, and
Yeah.
that's caraway seeds are very prevalent in Norwegian cooking. And I remember when my son was a baby, this is a little off topic, but when my son was a baby, he was he had some like digestive issues. He cried a lot. He was always in like it was almost like gassy. And
Hmm.
I read somewhere, I can't remember where, to make caraway tea for him. So
Hmm.
basically, you're just
Hmm.
steeping the caraway seeds, cooling it
Hmm.
down, and then giving that to him, and it worked. And
Yeah.
it's probably because, like you said, the all the, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? The bacteria and such, that the good
Yep.
bacteria that's in there, and the sciencey things that are the
Hmm.
biology that's
Hmm.
going on.
Yep.
It's fascinating. And I never thought about that until this very moment when you were talking about that. And it makes total sense now.
Yeah. Yeah. So in Germany, one of the remedies for little babies with gas and colics is fennel tea.
Yeah,
Now, I have not tried fennel and I have not tried cumin. They're probably somewhere along the same lines,
right.
but I don't have any experience with it. So what I tell people when they're asking me, "Hey, have you ever tried?" And I'm like, "No, but if you do, let me know what happens
Yeah.
because I'd love to know."
Well, I had a bottle of caraway seeds, and that was the only thing I used it for. It's probably still in the way back of my pantry, and I should probably throw it out because he's 19 now. So
Yeah, it
they're
doesn't hurt to
probably
get fresh
no
ones.
good. But it's
Yeah.
funny when you think about the ingredients that we use and how something so simple, it doesn't just affect flavor or texture, but like the science that's going on behind the scenes that you're not even aware of. And I find that so fascinating. As a
Yeah.
kid, I loved chemistry in school. And I think that's why I like cooking so much,
Mhm.
because I can kind of play with those chemistry skills a little bit. And that this whole thing is fascinating to me. So from
Yeah,
start
it's
to finish, right? If I decide today I want to do this,
right.
from today until how long will it take me till I can bake bread?
Well, in the summer it could be 6 days, in the winter it might be 11 days.
Okay. Very well. Good. Yeah, because you said that about the temperature. And yes, I'm in northeastern Pennsylvania, so it would be getting cold here in the winter. So even if you put it by a window, it'd probably be colder than anywhere else.
Yeah, but you can put it by heat source.
Yeah.
You can, like I said, you can put it in your stove if you have a
Yeah.
pilot light, or if you
Mhm.
just have a little light in there. It doesn't even need to be a pilot light, just a
Right.
little light bulb will emit
Yeah.
enough heat. There's probably some warm spot where you can keep it. It doesn't have to be your kitchen. Just make sure that there's nothing that might be swirling around in the area that could
Okay.
be cross-contaminating. But again, it doesn't need to be sterile. People have been baking with sourdough for over 6,000 years. You
Right.
better believe they did not have sterile environments back then.
They weren't Clorox wiping back in the
No,
days. That's for
definitely
sure.
not. Yes.
That's for sure.
So, when you keep that in mind, you can be a little bit more relaxed about it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, when you think about it.
Yeah, and a
So
lot of people are they're so afraid of making mistakes. And I'm like, okay, so what's the worst that can happen? You throw out
right.
a
A little bit of
like a
flour and
jar with
water.
some flour and water or buttermilk in it, and it costs you maybe what, $1.50, and
Mm,
you throw it out. It's a learning experience. So
right.
what's the worst that can happen? And just go for it. Just have fun.
Try
And
again.
I'm not sciencey at all. I never did well in chemistry in school, but I still love the whole science, and it's
Yeah.
really fascinating learning the history of sourdough, how long people have been baking with sourdough, and then people often ask me about heirloom starters because there's a bit of a craze out there getting a
I
gold
was
rush
just gonna ask.
starter, 150-year-old, whatever. And what I have learned is there is a microbial content of sourdough starters, but not every single sourdough starter has the same microbial content. And what I'm trying to say is that there are microbes in your environment.
Hmm.
And once you bake with it 4 times, the sourdough starter that you initially got has completely changed and adapted to what you have in.
Right. Because you've been adding new stuff to it.
You've been adding, yes, your flour, your water, whatever swirls around in your kitchen, whatever happens on your, and I will touch my sourdough starter and I use a fork to mix it up, and then there's something stuck, and then I take my fingers and pinch off the last bit and put it in there and thinking, yeah, I have a good microbiome, so I'm adding some to it. And um, so yeah, so it will change. It will adapt
Okay.
to, and also certain temperatures, and this is one of the ways you can influence the sourness by the temperature. If you specifically, for example, you put your sourdough bread, your dough, in the refrigerator, it slows down the fermentation, so it favors different cultures
Oh,
than if you put it in a really warm environment. Warm is what yeast's like. So if you want a milder bread, you want a shorter rise time. So you put it in a really warm spot and it will
okay.
explode, and then you can bake it really fast. And so that's just to like
Huh.
get you a little bit of idea of how to influence it. And yeah, so all of those factors play into it and will change the makeup of your sourdough starter. So if you get one, and I read this book, I think it's called Sourdough Culture. It um I would be happy to get back to you after this so you can put the right link
Sure.
to this podcast because it's a really good book. I really enjoyed it. It's a really good read. It's well written by a journalist who goes to a party and somehow he ends up with the sourdough starter. He's given one and then he wonders because supposedly it's a 150, 160-year-old starter and he wonders, can I actually trace and prove that it is really
Hmm.
from where they say it is?
That's
So then he
fascinating.
goes all the way back into the history and he talks about the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Greek and how many ships of grains they had going down the Nile and the Tiber to feed the Roman soldiers. And because of all the bread that they were baking, super fascinating, super
Yeah.
fascinating. And then he goes into a little bit more recent history. And I'm not going to do a spoiler here. I'm just going to leave it open.
Okay. No, no, no. It's fascinating.
It's
Yeah.
super fascinating. Yes. It's
Yeah.
a really good book. I love it. And I will get back to you and make sure I have the title
Yes.
right. I
Uh,
think the author's name is Eric Pallant,
Okay.
Pallant, Eric. And I think the book is called Sourdough Culture. I've read too many sourdough books.
Occupational hazard.
Occupational hazard,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes.
So we'll
But
be
I
sure
highly
to
recommend it.
find
Yes.
that link and put it in the show notes for you. So if you're interested in reading that and learning some history of your food, I mean, I think that that's fascinating.
And
I know,
how
like,
it's connected to humankind and
yeah,
the evolution of humans and all of that. Yeah. Yeah.
right. Especially something that's so humble as bread,
Yes.
that has been around
Yes.
for thousands and thousands of years.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
just it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm assuming there's many more things you can make with sourdough starter besides bread, correct?
Yes. Yes. 100%. You
Okay.
can do savory and you can do sweet, obviously.
Mhm.
I actually like adding sourdough starter to a lot of foods because it gives it a bit more complex,
Mm,
interesting taste and flavor
okay.
profile. I told my German mom that I was making sourdough pasta, and she goes, and that's good. So
Nice.
typical skeptical. I mean, she didn't say you can eat that, but like, and that's good. It's actually really good. I've
Really?
added it to so I'm German, right? I love pretzels. I grew up on pretzels because I was born in Stuttgart, which is one of the pretzel capitals of the world.
Okay.
Munich was the other one. And since then, I've started making sourdough pretzels, and we all agree that sourdough pretzels are a lot more interesting in taste than regular yeast-based
Hmm.
pretzels. I have made sourdough dumplings, sourdough pizza, sourdough carrot cake, sourdough lemon cake,
Oh,
sourdough pancakes, waffles,
okay. So you're
English
not
muffins,
limited.
bagels. I mean, I almost don't think I can't think of anything right now that you couldn't make in sourdough.
Okay. How did the pasta turn out?
Ooh, yummy. I think,
I wasn't
I
sure
think
there when you went ooh. Is that going to be a good ooh or a bad ooh?
No, it's a good ooh. Oh, no, no. So I would say that anytime you make homemade pasta, it is so much better than store-bought. And yes, it
Absolutely.
takes a little bit more time and effort, but I think it's so worth it. And then once you make it sour, it doesn't taste sour. It's not like you think you're eating bread in fettuccine form.
Right.
It has its own because you're cooking it in water, right? So,
Mhm.
but it's I mean, subtle but interesting
Right. So
and
I imagine it
delicious.
would help with the balance of flavors, when you think like
Mhm.
salt, fat, acid, heat, like those
Yes,
those flavor
yes,
profiles. And I think that it would, definitely contribute there. Yeah.
yes, yes. It's definitely worth it. So you can always, I mean, for people with sourdough discard, I would say make sourdough pasta. Or if you end up having a little bit more, like with our poor math example from earlier, throw it into your pasta dough.
Right, right. Oh, no, there's so many options.
Yes.
I always tend to just think about bread, but I'd heard people, now
Mhm.
that you say it, doing pancakes and English muffins and things like that with the discard, but I never really knew what it meant. They're like, oh, discard XYZ, whatever it was they're making. And I'm
Right.
just like, I don't know what half those words mean. So, I'm going to
Yeah, and I
scroll
feel like
past.
sometimes when we don't really know, we almost build up a little wall because
Hmm.
it's too much. We get overwhelmed. It's like,
Right.
I don't understand it, and so I hope that I sparked your curiosity
Yeah.
and inspired you to give it a try.
Absolutely. Like I said, it doesn't seem as big and scary as it did coming in. Like
Mhm.
I don't, it's not something I have to feed daily and like an extra mouth to feed in my house. And, you've got to have
No.
this space and it's growing and doing all these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, and just for a shameless plug here, just because I got so many questions on YouTube, and you only have so many hours in a day to answer questions and
Right.
comments. I thought, okay, so how can I make this more accessible, and how can
Yeah.
I go a little bit deeper and put it all in one place, really? So I created an online course, and people can sign up for that, and
Great.
that course comes with a private Facebook group where sometimes you have a picture and you're like, oh, does this look right? It has a funny color, and then I can actually respond to it much better because you can't send pictures on YouTube comments.
Right.
And then I have some people who are off grid and they said, oh, that's all well and good with your online course, but I have my iPad, but I don't have electricity in my kitchen. So I have recently written a book, and the book contains the same information, just slightly different, different presentation.
Right.
I also have that book, and you can get that on Amazon. And that's for people who like to read and like to have something to flip through, and maybe also to
Right. Maybe you
gift.
want both. Maybe you want to have the book and the course and
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
There you
And
go.
we'll include links to both of those in the show notes so
Yeah.
that if you want to check out Anya's course or book, you can very
Right.
easily just go to the show notes and get the
Right.
link. But I
And the
think that
book is
that's,
specifically written. I don't want to say simplistic necessarily, but I wanted to keep it really accessible, just like my sourdough starter.
mhm,
And there's always more, and you can always, like I said, you can always up level with hydration levels and pH of your sourdough starter and really geek out. But I feel like this is the easy way to get in, and then you can do whatever you want. Either
right.
you stay there or you get as intricate as you want.
So you got to walk before you can run.
Yes, exactly.
Now, this has been so informative. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Anya, for sharing your tips and your no-fail starter method. Why don't you remind our listeners where exactly they can find you online?
They can find me at ourgabledhome.com. That's OurGabled home.com. And that's also the name of my YouTube channel, Our Gabled Home. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Pinterest. I'm on Facebook. I'm Our Gabled Home everywhere. I think I'm on TikTok too, yes.
All the places.
All the places where you might try to find me.
Yeah. And like I said, we'll put all those links in the show notes to make it easier
Thank you.
for listeners to check you out there. But
Yeah, thank you, Christina.
so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. You definitely made it much more accessible for me and answered so many of my questions. It was very, very helpful.
Oh, good. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I can talk about this stuff all day long.
And thank you
Great.
so much for tuning in to today's episode of Behind the Recipe. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and picked up a few tips or even the inspiration to try sourdough in your kitchen. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave me a review. And of course, make sure you share this episode with someone who loves food. Until next time, happy cooking. And remember, everything's better when shared in the kitchen.